I'm going to be blunt. The approach the world has taken over the last 35 years to solve Africa's many challenges, from poverty to disease to environmental degradation, has been a failure. Why? I think there are three reasons. First, we've thrown billions of dollars at these problems, but the money has been siloed by issue, so it can't begin to tackle these complex problems in an integrated fashion. Second, we support the most promising young African scholars to go overseas for higher degrees, but 4 out of 5 of them don't come home. And third, as a consequence, Africa is losing its best and brightest, and instead relies on foreign experts who parachute in and go home after a few years. The result of all of this is a disastrous perpetual cycle of brain drain that has left Central Africa without the expertise or needed continuity. So how do I know this? I know this because for the last 35 years I've been doing research in Central Africa, and I've seen these issues personally. That's me in 1983 holding a blue-breasted kingfisher. In the next 10 minutes or so, I'd like to describe a new vision for solving problems in Africa's Congo Basin, one that leverages the tremendous talent of Africans. But first, let's come to grips with some of the many, many challenges that face this incredible region. The rainforests of the Congo Basin are spectacular and tremendously important for the planet. They store 40 billion tons of carbon, second only to the Amazon, and harbor an estimated 1 out of every 5 species on the planet. They include incredible bird species, such as this wood owl, amazing primate species, such as this red-eared guinan, and many other species. And while there's still tremendous biodiversity left in the Congo Basin, the situation is changing rapidly. These challenges are familiar to most of you. They include deforestation and climate change and overpopulation and poverty. But too often this narrative about the challenges is oversimplified. So let me give you a specific example of how this plays out on the ground. Some real-life consequences that our current approach, siloed and populated by short-term foreign experts rather than well-educated locals, doesn't even see, much less understand. We've all heard about the catastrophic declines of African elephants because of trafficking in ivory. It's estimated that we lose 30,000 elephants every year. 30,000 elephants are slaughtered every year. And many of our largest conservation groups are concentrated and focused on this issue, and they are doing good work. But when you are on the ground, you realize that many of the problems are much, much larger. In fact, the loss of these creatures is just the tip of the ecological iceberg. About 90% of rainforest trees require animals to disperse their seeds, and the loss of seed dispersers such as forest elephants and primates that feed on fruit means rainforest trees are unable to regenerate, and the genetic variation of these forests will eventually be lost over time. Losing elephants and primates doesn't just mean losing iconic species, it means losing the ability of rainforests to regenerate once it's been cut down. Indigenous people have the knowledge of which animals disperse which seeds, but we can only attain that knowledge through a sustained scientific presence, not by parachuting in. So the question is, where can we find answers to these challenges? And I believe that the answer is in Africa from Africans. And how do we make that answer a reality? Well, in place of parachuting experts, we need a permanent presence. Rather than exporting Africa's best and the brightest, we need to support local capacity. Instead of silos, we need interdisciplinary teams. In short, we need to create institutions that are permanent and interdisciplinary in Africa for Africans. This approach can work. How do I know? Because I've seen it succeed. 7 years ago, we opened a center in Cameroon under the auspices of UCLA. The center is one-stop shopping. We help international researchers come in. We help them with logistics. We help them get permits before they arrive. But most importantly, we put them in touch with local researchers so they can develop collaborative projects. And that's where the payoff has really been. So far, we've had over 3,000 scholars from 20 different countries use this facility. Now, one example of how this permanent presence translates into a local impact is illustrated by Professor Eric Fokum. Eric is a professor at the University of Buya, and before we started our center, he had a very small lab, a couple of graduate students, really just getting by. And Eric had done his PhD in the U.S. and would really, things weren't working, he could go back to the U.S. and get a good job. Now Eric has a dozen collaborative grants with institutions in the U.S. and Europe, and 14 graduate students, 9 of whom are women. And they're tackling some of the most fundamental questions in Central Africa, from amphibian declines to climate change to a new project he just initiated on the emergence of Zika virus. Finally, you take that permanent and local network and you make it interdisciplinary. But what does interdisciplinary look like? What does it mean? It means bringing together 2 researchers who otherwise wouldn't have met. And this includes a professor in the blue shirt, Maxi, who's a professor in Equatorial Guinea who studies trees, and one of Eric's graduate students, Gerard, who studies frogs, both of them working together to understand the impacts of climate change. And when you do that over time with structure, you have something similar to our CAB Alliance project.
Biodiversity is the matrix that holds the world together. Basically everything that we depend on as human beings depends on a healthy environment and biodiversity in that environment. CAB Alliance is a group of biologists and policymakers that are focused on trying to maximize the amount of biodiversity that can be protected in the face of climate change. Most researchers in Central Africa tend to work sort of independently in individual silos. And what we're trying to do with this project is bridge the silos. So it brings us together in a way that hasn't happened in the past.
A lot of our educational activities are really designed to help the next generation of scientists develop very quickly the contacts that they need to develop fruitful collaborations for a long time. We want to make this place a place where researchers want to come.
It's also training and education, so training the best young scientists to solve these problems going forward. And also the third leg of the project is policy. We need to build bridges, and the bridge we're trying to build is by connecting the science we do with the policy to identify new protected areas.
The issues facing biodiversity are so extreme, and we know there are big changes going on, and the changes that are coming are even bigger.
By supporting CAB Alliance, you're supporting a community of scientists with diverse expertise that I think in the long run are going to be the ones who are finding the solutions in a more integrative way.
The whole goal is to really make Central Africa a place where people here have the skills and the training necessary to be the leaders of the next generation.
So the next step is to scale this up. To scale it up so it's permanent, local, and interdisciplinary, so all of those 3 things can work together. And last year, we took that step and opened the Congo Basin Institute, a partnership between IITA and UCLA. IITA stands for the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture, which is the largest NGO in Africa working on food security. And the Congo Basin Institute is the first foreign affiliate of UCLA in its 97-year history. So far, over a dozen universities and NGOs have joined, and we're in the process of attracting more to create this research and educational park that is both permanent and interdisciplinary. We plan to build it into a green facility that expands on existing laboratory space and adds housing, a conference center, and long-term interdisciplinary research can thrive. This approach is also scalable. Because CBI will leverage IITA's network of 17 campuses and stations across sub-Saharan Africa. So we're already starting to move into other countries to make a difference. So that's why this is the most optimistic I've been about Africa in 35 years. I believe we can do this, and when we do, 4 out of 5 of the most talented African scientists will stay home rather than leave. And when that happens, Africa will be on the right road to solving Africa's problems. Thank you.